Welcome back to the Tu-Vie podcast, your TV movie entertainment needs podcast. I'm your host, James, and today we are going to be talking about the X-Men. Now, before I get started, I do want to put out a bit of a spoiler warning for X-Men 97, so if you haven't watched the latest episode, excluding the one that is released today, Wednesday, April 3rd. I'm talking about all the episodes prior, so if you haven't seen those, please go to this timestamp. It's going to be going on past everything. I'm going to be going spoiler-wise. I will be referencing X-Men 97, but in a just vague sense and everything we've seen from the trailers and so forth. With that being said, let's get into it. So as you guys can tell, this episode is going to be called The X-Men Problem. And now I am not telling you what is wrong with the X-Men. It's just more about the timeline of what kept going wrong and why the animated show is working. So before we even get into the movies, I want to start with X-Men 97 so badly. X-Men 97 is such a stupid good show. It is so good. It's unreal. The fact that they were able to pick up the pieces back from when the actual show ended in 1997 and pick up with an amazing story from everything that's happened since, while not having you feel like if you didn't watch it, you missed out. Yes, if you saw the original show, you catch other glimpses, like when Morph turned into that really tired looking version of himself. It's because that's when he was under control of Mr. Sinister and all those other different things. But at the same time, they expand that story so well by introducing, like we saw in the last episode, the Madeline Pryor thing with the Jean Grey clone and them figuring out what's going on. And then they have their son, Nathan, which is then becoming Cable, who we saw in the last show, but it's coming back in this show. And even when making the show, Kevin Feige had two requirements. One, they get the rights to that theme song, which is just, and two, that they get the original cast from that show to reprise their roles. Now, I don't believe everybody is coming back for the exact same role. I believe majority of them, the cast came, because I know they recasted Jean, Morph, and I think they recasted Gambit. I don't believe they did, but either way, they kept Rogue, Storm, Wolverine. I know they also recasted Cyclops. The thing is that they kept majority of that same cast and they were recording in the same way they did last time, and they even have Storm doing her big speech right before she does her powers and everything. It's so good. And we even get to see hints of other stuff in the comics that if you didn't know about came as a shock, like the Magneto Rogue thing. It's not something I know everything about. Probably look at Coy Jean Drew. He probably knows everything here. Thing is that it's expanding more of the X-Men storyline with this show and allowing it to be in a better animation and way better format. Not to say that the old show has crappy animation. For its time, it was awesome, and it still kind of holds up now. It's really fun to see that nostalgic kind of animated style, but now that we have 3D animation and it's much sharper and more vibrant, I love the style that they're taking with it by combining the way they used to do the old show and making it a newer face. And despite all that stuff happening in the show, the fact that they drew in such a huge audience, and that with the success of X-Men 97 having an over 500% increase in the past show, this animated show is doing so well. And I don't know if I'm mistaken, probably, but the thing is I heard a while ago, like years ago, when they were talking about the show, they started promoting the concept art. I think it was at either D23 or at Comic-Con, that the show was going to be renewed for a second season as well. Like they're doing 2 new seasons. Time will tell. I guess if I'm right. If I'm not, you didn't hear from me. If I am right, you did hear from me. I said it. That's all me right here. One of the things I think the show does a really good job at is, like I said earlier, you don't have to see the old show to understand what is going on. And if you missed it, it's fine. It's little subtle details. But the whole point is that the story continued in such a great way, in that it reminded us why Scott, Cyclops, is so cool. And they also showed everyone and reminded some people, because some people forgot why the X-Men were made. I'm not going to get into that whole argument. It's stupid. It's not worth my time. But they reminded the world why Storm is an Omega level mutant, man. Turning sand into glass. Unreal. I think what the show is doing a really good job in is showing us why the X-Men were made, and showing us the real versions of the X-Men, and showing us what the X-Men are capable of when you give them a good story, a good director, and enough time to actually make this thing. So X-Men 97, good job. But this is where then I lead into the problem, the X-Men problem, because where did we go wrong? Why is it that an animated show 4 years after the last X-Men movie was ever released is it so much better than what we got in that timeline? And the first problem is, why did it waver so much and become so unreliable? And where did the inconsistency begin? The movies that started from the year 2000 and ended in 2020, ranging from the first X-Men movie to the New Mutants, had so many different ideas going at one time. Starting with the first X-Men movie, that movie was introducing us to all the different X-Men, the different problems that they were having, showcasing the villains and having it not be this new problem. We were introduced to new characters like Rogue and Wolverine, but we were stepping into the world of X-Men, like kind of how they've done with the stories, where it's like, oh, we're forming a team and we need more mutants. So it's more like, hey, you're a mutant. We got this problem. Want to help? And I wouldn't say it had a singular main character. That's kind of the whole point of the X-Men. But Wolverine was that focused character throughout the movies, where he was looking after Rogue, and then we found a little bit about his backstory in X2, and so on and so forth throughout just different parts of the movie. And it had a good vision. It had pretty good action sequences. It was a really good X-Men story just for a movie. And there was a lot of moments where, yes, it was very, early 2000s and stuff, but there were parts of it where I'm like, this feels X-Men. This feels right. I will, however, never forgive the line, what happens when a toe gets struck by lightning. Now, Colin, our resident comic expert, has informed me recently, because we talked about this, that that was supposed to be the third "do you know what happens" joke. Now, it wasn't going to be done by Rogue. I think it was going to be done by Toad or something like that, but it was going to be like she does it back to them kind of thing, where it was like a revenge. I don't know if that would make it better, but it would make it more clear as to why she came up with that, because Storm's cool. Storm's real cool. Omega level cool. That just did not hit, man. And with X2, we are introduced to a fantastic character, Kurt Wagner, the Nightcrawler. And we have this awesome opening of him just beaming through the White House. And we get this very personal story with him. And he's on screen for, I think, 4 minutes total. Over like a 2.5 hour movie, I think. This is a really long movie. But we still get these emotional beats where Bobby and his brother have to tell his parents, like, hey, we're mutants. We're actually not at a prep school. We're with this, program, not program, but school that we go to. So, we didn't know what to do. And I think moments like that, humanize these characters. We can feel attached to them. So then when we get to X3, The Last Stand, it's just gone. It's all gone. It doesn't even matter. Even Nightcrawler wasn't even there, which, by the way, wasn't directed by Bryan Singer. I don't even remember who. But the thing is that that's the one everyone remembers the most when you think of bad X-Men movies, because it was just terrible. There was so much build. I mean, yes, I did like the mutant cure story. That's a great story to do. It just was so much wrong, with some moments of cool. Not in that one, just in general. Also, I think if I'm not mistaken, they called Colossus, who's Russian, Peter, and made him American, I think. Either way, not good. Which then we are led into one of the most iconic movies with the X-Men, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Holy crap, man. I think the only cool thing about the movie was the fact that Liev Schreiber was just really giving it his all. And Hugh Jackman's great. We all love Hugh Jackman. We stand the Jackman. We knew he was going to be good. He's been good 3 other movies. So nothing new, but Liev was really giving it his all. Yeah, Ryan Reynolds was fun. That was a cool cameo. Totally ruined by the end of the movie. And I mean, we were introduced to so many great mutants. We had Blob, we had Gambit, we had every, like, I don't want to say obscure, but we were having characters that not everyone knew about. And that was kind of cool just for them to die. But again, no clear vision, because X-Men Origins was going to be introducing us to a whole different story of X-Men. Like, they were going to have one after Wolverine be Magneto, and it was going to be like an Inglorious Bastards kind of thing, where Magneto goes on a revenge spree, kind of like how he did in First Class. Oh, and Professor Charles Xavier was going to be a soldier in the war. Yeah. I'm moving past this one. I can't even spend more than a minute on this thing. But then we were introduced to First Class, the original X-Men. We were meeting Professor Xavier before he was in the wheelchair, and we got Eric's backstory in just this fashion that we kind of saw, I think, in X2, that then we see again in X-Men First Class, and we just get to know these characters more. We even get to see a young Mystique that was befriended by Charles, and we get to see them figure out, like, maybe mutants can do some really good things and we can have this team, and they go find other mutants. We had that wonderful Hugh Jackman cameo. But then we kind of get into the third act where Darwin, a character that is meant to adapt and survive all conditions, sticks his head in the tank, he grows gills, dies. Now, like, I get that the guy, Kevin Bacon of all people, was super powerful, and I don't know, put that weird glowing thing in his mouth. I don't know. And that moment where he's kind of phasing through all the different things he can to survive was interesting. I'm like, oh, cool. He's gonna, like, figure out a way to do. Nah, man goes full Medusa and just turns into stone. So, already off to a solid ending there. But then we get, some good moments like the coin scene where Eric puts on the helmet and blocks out Charles. And it's a good part. But man, that Darwin thing really sticks with you at the end because it's just so confusing. And First Class served as the reboot for all of this. We're like, hey, you know what? We're gonna start in the beginning. We're gonna make a congruent story all the way to where we got to in The Last Stand. And oh my word, did that not happen? Because the next two movies, The Wolverine, which was an interesting addition to the Logan spinoff trilogy where we see him go to Japan, we get a little bit of the Silver Samurai. And what I mean by little bit, I mean when they actually show the samurai suit, and then we get the giant robot one, which makes no sense. But there is I believe it's like a director's cut that's like, it's like unrated, which is good. It's cool. It's got better action sequences and he swears a little more, but still the same movie. And then we are met with the Sistine Chapel of X-Men movies, Days of Future Past. Bryan Singer makes his return to the X-Men movies with this absolute knockout, man. I remember going to see Days of Future Past in theaters, and I was just blown away from them doing, the Days of Future Past story so well done in that opening where we're going through the building that's just got the giant hole in it, and it's destruction, and it's just barren waste, and the mutant can't, it's just everything. And we're introduced to so many great mutants we never get to see ever again. We got Bishop, we had Blink, we had Warpath, we had Sunspot, we had Iceman in his prime. And then we had the returning characters like Storm, Colossus, Kitty Pryde. And those were great. It's like, awesome. We have the last leg of mutants, and they are some great mutants. There was like 5 Omega level mutants, and they were like, dude, we're on the last leg. There's like 100 Sentinels coming. And they brought the Sentinels, and those were practical, by the way. Yeah, they built them. They built like 12-foot tall Sentinel things. I don't know. They were tall, man. And it told such a cool story, having to go back in time and fix and not kill Trask and do all these different things to rewrite the future, and ending it on that note where he's in the mansion. Everything's fine. We have Beast walking by. I think it was Kelsey Grammer's Beast that came by. It was really cool to see that we're now in this later time where the X-Men movie starts, and we have James Marsden as Scott Summers, and then we have Jemison. I can't remember her name. Famke Jensen. That's her name. As Jean Grey, and we have the start back to where we need it to be. And then we left it there, because then the next movie that was all about that stuff was Apocalypse, which was the younger X-Men, like still the like semi older Charles Xavier after First Class, and the one we kind of briefly saw in Days of Future Past. But now it's like during the 70s, I think. Maybe it was the 80s. No, it was the 80s, because then we had that Stormlight. Welcome to the 80s. Man, Apocalypse. I had promise for that one. It was great. Oscar Isaac was a good looking Apocalypse. He looked good at the prosthetics, just was not good. There was no clear vision with this. There was just so many moments of this movie where it was so much buildup just to be let down. No real good story. And then we kick it off, the final leg of this trilogy, with Dark Phoenix, which I didn't even see until this year. So it was released in 2019. We're in 2024. I didn't even finish it, I think. Because you know what just ended it for me is when Scott dropped that F-bomb out of nowhere. Like, it was like when you find out, like when a little kid finds out what cussing is, that's what it felt. So I I got nothing for that. Just absolutely nothing because that's what it gave. I'm just gonna skip past the other movies because it's gonna be taking too long. So we had the Deadpool movies where Deadpool was great. It was a great standalone movie. It was awesome. We have some jokes about Wolverine, all the other different X-Men. We actually are in the X-Men mansion for a little bit with Colossus and Teenage Warhead. And then we have the same joke again where we're in the mansion and there's still no X-Men in Deadpool 2. There's that funny cameo where he's talking about Angel, and then we see Scott, shut the sliding doors. But that's still the younger group. The point is that Deadpool was its own thing, and it did such a good job with that. Ryan Reynolds' passion project finally done to completion and done so right. We're introduced to Cable and all these different things. It was such a good movie because it had vision. It knew what it wanted. It wanted a Deadpool movie while making fun of the X-Men movies. And Deadpool 3 is going to even do a better job at that because we're going to be getting different variants. We're going to be getting Wolverine and who knows. And then we were gifted with Logan. It's just a terrific goodbye to the character of Wolverine and Hugh Jackman, supposed last time playing the character. We were introduced to X-23. We got the mutant story where it's just him alone in the barren wasteland. And they changed a little bit to say that the X-Men are kind of like gone. There's no more mutants left. If they are, they're in hiding and they're being tracked down. And just it was a beautiful story. And for those curious about how Logan is kind of now either just be, retcon or something, it's totally different. Logan is final. That is absolutely going to happen. But Deadpool 3 takes place before the events of Logan, so it is catching him before it happens. But Logan was an awesome story. I personally prefer watching the black and white version, which I think adds so much more to this dark and sad feeling. I think it's much better. We were given the perfect Wolverine story. We got him berserker mode. We got everything we wanted that we've been wanting to see in one great movie. And then we have the last leg of them all, the New Mutants, a movie that was delayed 4, maybe 5 different times, and it should have gone to 6. It was not good. There was no clear vision as to what was going on. Anya Taylor-Joy as Magic, I think, for me, was the only thing that I remember about that movie. I thought she did great. If she was going to come back and play Magic, I'd be cool with that. But everything else just flopped for me, man. So we have the equation. We have the 2 different trilogies and all the different solo movies, and we have the lack of vision. And this is what the X-Men problem really is. It's all these different things that without the lack of vision, were met with nothing. We were met with so much confusion because now we didn't even understand the full official timeline of what was going on. Because if you watch, the movies, Jean dies in the end of Dark Phoenix, but then if you then were to continue when they're older, Jean's back again, but dies again. So the whole thing is that after X-Men Days of Future Past, the past movies from 2000 to 2006, which is X1 through 3, is just a different timeline. And everything else we're seeing is the correct timeline. So from First Class all the way to Dark Phoenix is this new timeline, while the New Mutants is its own thing, and Deadpool is a fun addition. I'm not even also going to attempt the shows because the shows are their own thing. They're so unique. We have, X-Men Unlimited, and then we have the animated X-Men, but not the animated one like these ones. It was an anime one. And then we have X-Men and the Wolverine and the X-Men. They're their own things, fun little projects. Steve Blum did great. So now we get to the part of the episode of the solution to the X-Men problem. With the string of really weird movies and a handful of really good movies, why is the animated show doing such a good job? Well, main thing is they have an idea, they had a vision, and they executed it excellently. And with the X-Men being such a popular group, a group you cannot mess up, because if you do, you lose the heart. I am not saying they have to include every single villain or every single character in order for the X-Men to be great. But if you introduce a character, don't let him disappear into the next movie, even if the director doesn't need him as much. Let him be included for something. Don't disappear. Nightcrawler. He was in X2, no longer in X3. Luckily, he is coming back for X-Men 97. Wonderful. With no clear vision in mind, you are left with just a story to be its own thing, while then having the expectation of continuing everything that was left behind. So with the change of director from Bryan Singer to the other guy for X3, we were just left with this other story that felt so different from the first 10 minutes. I think the X-Men are a truly wonderful group. They're one of my favorite Marvel characters, and they're one of the most iconic characters in comic book history. And with the release order messing up the timeline order, it's just such a hard understanding of it, because when you include the movies like Deadpool, which should be on their own and never included into this timeline thing, it's just hard to focus because you don't know where to go next. And with Marvel bringing in the X-Men sometime soon, I know that Deadpool is transferring from the Foxverse to the MCU, which is great. And if how they're going to be introducing more X-Men is maybe through this jump, then okay, that's good. But the thing is that there are more X-Men that need to be seen in the MCU from this point on. Because everyone, is thinking the same thing. Deadpool 3 has so much writing on it that if it drops the ball, it's detrimental. I have 1 billion% in Deadpool 3 doing such a great job in its own story as the third leg in its trilogy, but at the same time, introducing Deadpool into the MCU and the X-Men. There's so much that we don't know about the X-Men. All I know is that X-Men 97 has done a better job than most of the X movies in the last 20 years, excluding, Future Past, First Class, X1 and 2, and, I guess that's that. I mean, Logan, this is standalone. Don't really call that the X movies, but the X-Men movies, those four, pretty good. I firmly believe that Kevin Feige is going to be treating the X-Men properly into this new stage. I know he's not going to do jack with the Inhumans because he's got some beef with them, which I'm super mad about because I love the Inhumans. Whatever. The X-Men problem may be an unsolvable problem as of now. We do know ways to help adjust the problem, but there is no, in my opinion, clear solution as to why the live action movies have done great when Ryan Reynolds is on screen, for most cases, and how the animated series is doing such a good job. One day I do believe we will find an answer, and I do believe we will find a continuous way to make good X-Men stories from start to finish, but I wouldn't count on it right now. What are your thoughts about the X-Men movies, X-Men animated series, or everything else just with the X-Men problem? Let me know your thoughts about it below. I know it's a very different kind of episode. I know it's not very video essay, but it's very kind of a pondering question I had because I found myself watching almost all the X-Men movies this week. And so I kind of begged the question of why can we not have one singular vision? And that's where I wanted to make this episode. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys did enjoy, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you are watching or listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, be sure to follow us there. Also, be sure to check us out on TikTok, Instagram, Letterboxd, and that's that. You can find all of these wonderful links in our description below, or you guys can check on the homepage. Let us know if you guys want us to cover any of the other stuff like the past Avengers movies, anything else with going on in Phase 4. Let us know below. Thank you guys again for watching. We'll see you guys next time.